Hello, everyone, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the Better the Pond Pondcast, where we talk to amazing people doing incredible things that lead the charge of generosity. My name is Warren Berry, and I'm your host and the founder of Instinctive Solutions, where we believe that everyone's an odd duck, but that's what makes them awesome. Today, our guest is Andre Brisson. How do you fight an invisible opponent? For 40 years, Andre fought his ADHD, but has now made his invisible opponent visible. After many years of being the odd duck and not fitting in, he realized that this aspect of himself wasn't something that was wrong with him, and it wasn't the enemy. It was what made him who he was, and it was his strength. He is giving high-performance people with ADHD a voice through his company, Tactical Breakthroughs, and his new podcast, The Impulsive Thinker. Thank you, Andre, for helping all of us in our impulsive pond. Ladies and gentlemen, Andre Brisson. Andre Brisson, I am so excited to have you as a guest on my Better the Pond podcast. Thank you for coming on and joining me today.
Well, thanks for having me, Warren. This is fantastic.
I've been really looking forward to this since we last spoke. And before I jump right into the questions, Andre, I want to just talk a little bit about the work you do, because I think it's absolutely fascinating. It's going to sort of prelude where we're going to go today with this. We were talking earlier about your work with, Tactical Breakthroughs, which is your company. And we'll talk about this a little bit later about the Impulsive Thinker podcast that you have. Mm-hmm. So we'll definitely jump at that at the end and want to showcase that. But your work with adult ADHD, I think, is absolutely fascinating. And you want to just kind of give me just kind of an overall view of that before we jump into this, because I think the work that you're doing is really exceptional, and it's quite rare in the business world. So if you want to just give me an overview before we jump into this.
Yeah, sure. So in 2007, I really realized that I didn't fit in with the company I work for. So I'm an engineer by trade. So actually, I'm an entrepreneur who does a side hustle of engineering, as some say it. I didn't fit in, and I knew I was different, but I didn't fit in. So I went and started my own company, another engineering company. Basically, what I did is I created a space where I could fit in, even though I had struggles and challenges. And then, fast forward another 10 so years, about 4 years ago, I started searching for that answer. And it turned out I was diagnosed with severe ADHD a few years ago and mild Asperger's. And then doing what I do best is I learn. I'm a fact finder, so I need a lot of details. So I reached a lot about ADHD brains and figured out my own, and made the realization that it's not that I'm broken. I got a different brain that works differently than the majority of people, and there's nothing wrong with that. And then seeing how other people are struggling with it, I decided to start Tactical Breakthroughs, and then in the end come out with this podcast called The Impulsive Thinker. Like the other thing too is ADHD is typically diagnosed with kids that are hyperactive, the bouncy, distractible, they disrupt, very disruptive. And then the inattentive ADHD, that you're more lost in the clouds and in your internal thoughts, are less likely to be diagnosed, which are women and girls. But adults who do well in school, who are successful, are also overseen and ignored as not having ADHD. You're successful, did well at school, you don't have ADHD because you've done something. But with all that, I achieve goals, I am successful, but at the same time, I still have a lot of internal struggles with executive functioning, and also not having the great confidence in my worst critic. So there's a lot of other unseen challenges that are seen in there. And I thought people need to understand that we can make this work if we manage our symptoms, and then becomes our strengths. And let's understand ourselves and be happy with ourselves and just move on forward.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that overview, because I find it really interesting that for the most part, when we look at the ADHD side of things, especially when you're correct with, it's usually with kids, right? And it's seen as a dysfunction and a hindrance and a distraction. And so, it's rarely have I talked to people where they found it as a strength. And I think that's obviously what the work that you're doing.
Yeah. And it's converting I've always said, and I've learned, like, we know each other through the Colby family. And I made a realization quite a few years ago that, even my strengths, if I let them go rampant, they become a weakness. And then I just flipped that once I figured out that, with my diabetes, I was diagnosed type 2 diabetes about 8 months prior to my ADHD diagnosis. And once I realized that not much I can do about the diabetes, but it's manageable, I can control it.
Right.
That's what I did, is I managed that. And then I flipped that with the ADHD. Not much I can do about it to get rid of it. Like, I can't cure myself ADHD or diabetes, but I can manage the symptoms. And that's when I realized that, whoa, my hyper focus is my strength. My impulsivity is my creativity. But if I let that go rampant, it does now become a disorder and weaknesses. So I just kind of flipped it on its end, create a bunch of refine my systems and mechanisms I had created prior on while I was undiagnosed unknowingly. And then I can get, I'm more productive and more accepting of myself, which was a big one.
Yeah, you figured out how not to get in your own way.
I'm getting better at it. It's going to be a constant struggle, but I'm way better at it than I was 3.5, 4 years ago. Because in the end, I played a character for 40 years. I masked my symptoms. I changed the way I was so I could fit in. And I always was striving for that next acceptance. And that's just a negative cycle.
All right. Well, that is the overview. So let's jump right into our questions into the podcast. So, Andre, what took you from being a gosling? And when I say gosling, I'm talking going right back to your humble beginnings, to the time of leaving the nest to where you are today. Andre Brisson, what is your backstory?
Well, my backstory is, I've always been the odd duck, black sheep, the odd one, the hyperactive one. And the one that just randomly goes anywhere and everywhere with thoughts, and, I guess I was kind of life of the party, but no one wants you beyond that around. So, in a way I realized, like in high school, I fit everywhere, but belong nowhere. So I can talk to everyone. I can be part of every group, but I really did not belong there. And to a certain extent, I am still thinking that way, believe that way. But since I've now changed my glasses have changed, I'm starting to look in the right places. I am starting to find places I can belong. But I've always known I've been different, even though I was told that's not the right way of doing things. You should not do this, either it's embarrassing or that's not how everyone's doing it. But I always knew deep down that this was the correct way. And for me, being a problem solver and a learner, and a resistant follow through, which I don't really like rigid systems, I can still get things done if I was just let go of my way. And I was always restrained, even through childhood, school, high school, university, even, which was a miracle to get through on time, even at all for engineering. And then even with my companies doing, I found with time is, if I stopped listening to people, I was very successful if I just did it my way that I felt right. And if I start following all the other rules, that's when I start running into problems. So always trying to search for, self-actualization has been a long life search. I think I've always been doing it. I've always watched people and I try to understand why they react that way or why they're that way. One of my top strengths is individualism. I like to know the real you, the true you, and everyone's unique. And I'm unique, even though I've worked to not be unique until recently, where it's just like, this is the ADHD diagnosis was the last puzzle piece to complete my whole picture of me and understanding of me. I got ADHD strengths, I got non-ADHD strengths. And those are two different pillars that makes a great union.
So, that's fascinating, because that actually leads me into my question. Where I was going to take you is, take me back to when you were a kid. Now, were you're out in London, Ontario? Is that correct?
Yeah, just outside London, Ontario.
And have you always been from just outside London, Ontario?
No, I was originally from Northern Ontario, Sudbury, but my dad moved down to Bruce County at the Bruce nuclear site. So that's where I was technically raised. So a French kid in an Anglophone area. So there's one reason to be different. Um, you know,
I'm going to leave it alone.
yeah, the first language I learned was French, and I learned English by just being tossed out with other kids, and make do. But
so, so any other siblings in your family?
yeah, I got a brother and sister, all younger. My sister was just recently diagnosed with Asperger's, which is in
Okay.
the autism scale.
Hmm.
I think she's a little higher on the spectrum than I am for that, which is Asperger's syndrome is a high functioning autism,
Hmm.
which has more to do with your social interactions than anything.
Right. And your brother?
My brother is unknown right now. I got an inkling, but he hasn't looked for anything himself yet.
Oh, okay. So you've always been out in that. So you're always out in Ontario, and so you grew up in London. So, but you know, I want to put the dots together here, Andre, because it's interesting. Because here you were 40 years later being diagnosed as ADHD, but when looking back to when you were a kid and when you were a kid in school, right? How did that work for you back then?
Um, what the ADHD you mean?
Yeah.
Um, it would be the creativity and the impulsivity really helped with the humor. And then the other thing too is I got a different way of seeing the world than the majority of people. I like, I see holes where other people don't. And my claim to fame is solving problems where other people give up on. I could always see things differently, and I don't see, smokes and mirrors in politics. I see right through.
Mm.
Um, but that it caused issues because my impulsivity and trying to make sure everything's right and justified barreled through first. And then the way I am is, since I've already started down this road, I'm not going to quit. But it's that helped me at the same time, but I also still don't understand how I didn't get more trouble. I was disruptive. I was more on the intellectual side of disruptedness. I was just wasn't, I was hyperactive, but I was also mentally hyperactive. So I'd be challenging teachers and principals a lot more, but it was more on the intellectual level than just
Mm.
being a little brat, being disruptive or pushing people around. So the hyper focus is my big ticket item of why I was able to learn stuff. And for high school, and especially for university, when I came to final exams, I would just sit down and hyper focus 16, 18 hours a day and learn the whole course. So I'd learn a whole course in a day and a half rather than the 4 months prior. And that was the only reason I got through university, was because the hyper focus before exams.
Interesting. So one of my questions I have for you, Andre, is, I'm going to go back into public school because I think it's really important for kids to understand this, but also, any of the parents that are listening to this and understanding their own children. When you were in class, I mean, were you the class clown?
Oh yeah.
You were always always doing things a little differently or a little more erratic. Did you ever go back and, out of interest sake, read your report cards from when you were a kid in elementary school or even in high school?
Yeah, I have, and it's written right there. But again, it was masked by the fact I was getting good marks.
Uh,
Um, but yeah, I was the class clown. But the other thing too that was key, which especially with a lot of most ADHD kids, and if they're being masked by their intellect, is social awkwardness. They're usually the odd person out. They're
mhm,
usually the target of bullying or ridicule. And for me, I countered the ridicule with my own comedy or humor, but at the same time, it was self-deprecating. Basically, I'll get to me first before you guys get to me first, and the ridicule. So the social awkwardness was definitely it, and that was a lot of the cause of the ridicule and bullying, was that you're just socially awkward. You don't understand. Maybe that's had to do a little bit of the Asperger's, but I've seen a lot of ADHD kids is that, like my oldest daughter being a hyperactive girl, is definitely not a girly thing. And she's kind of being pushed out of certain friendships because you're not being a real girl type of stuff, right? This
mhm.
follows along the lines, these social norms, just because you're the odd duck, you stay the odd duck, right?
Mhm.
It's, we just gotta, and all we do with that is we work with our daughters to say, it might be cool to be with them, but if you prefer being with other people or like-minded, we try to, you work with them to make sure that they can follow the right path and that they be comfortable with themselves.
So, if you look at, because of your knowledge and your experience, you're able to help your daughter out to navigate those waters. But did you have that at all when you were a kid?
Oh, no, 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 no. I was just stop being that way. You're drawing unwanted attention of our perfect family. And then a lot of things I remember from school from teachers is if you want to go to university, you got to smarten up. You got to stop doing this. That's not what a smart kid does or whatnot. You should not challenge this. You should not challenge that. It's just constant negative feedback. And a lot of it had to do with just stop doing it that way, which is my way.
Right. But you really didn't have a way for yourself, I guess, to sort of navigate those waters on your own. So
No,
you how could you possibly advocate for yourself?
I did not know what it was. Right. It's like the Rick Green, one of the from Totally ADD, he says is once he was diagnosed at ADHD at 49, now he knew the invisible opponent that was always sucker punching you. Right. So
Mhm.
now that you know what the invisible opponent you're fighting, now you weaponize yourself or you train yourself to combat that by managing and learning a lot about it. But no, I couldn't advocate it because I couldn't explain it. This is the way this is the way my brain works, or this is my impulsivity, or I really need a lot of details before I'm going to start a project. And if it
Mhm.
doesn't make sense to do this project because you didn't give enough detail, no way to speak it. It's just I know I don't doesn't make sense to me, and you know how teachers don't like that. If it
Mhm.
doesn't make sense, can't explain it. You're just being lazy.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I got the same thing too, growing up as well. So I definitely appreciate that. What take me into your high school years, Andre, and what that was like for you, and you know, as you grew and developed and got into and you're older, and you could sort of now start to sort of self advocate a little bit more, I suppose. How was that experience for you in high school?
High school was, I still have mixed feelings about it. Like it was fun. That's where I really realized actually grade 9, I was hanging out with the cool groups. And then one day the pack leader turned around, looked at the guy beside me who I started to get along because I went to a completely new school. I knew no one
Mm.
because I can basically erase everyone else from elementary school and start new. These people don't know me, and I can, and at that time, that's the ADHD uh, brush I was painting in elementary school. So it goes somewhere else. They don't know me. I can start from scratch.
Mhm.
And he looked at this kid I was starting to get along with. He just says, punch him in the face. He's annoying me. And the guy turned around, cracked me right in the middle of school. So I got up, I looked at this, I said, this is crap. This doesn't make sense. So, you know what? Screw it. I'm just going to be me. If you want to follow, fine. If not, I don't care. And that's where I started realizing that I fit in everywhere but belong nowhere. And I just kept rotating through the groups. But I think now that what I know now is I think I left those groups before I was rejected.
Mhm. So
So,
again, so the same lesson, right? That you're saying, I'll
yeah,
get to me first before you'll get to me,
yeah.
right?
Actually, you're insightful. I never put those two together. But yeah, high school, I got along with a lot of people. I learned it was boring for me. Like I learned like school was not challenging, so it was boring. Therefore, I got into more. Then I was a little more disruptive in class because if the class was boring, I would just speak out or just be a goofball. But again, it's just there's being told to do a certain way, and I fought it. I've always had that in me. This stand up for myself and fight for it. If I truly believe it, but I couldn't explain it.
Mhm.
Um, and that again, that also followed into university. I still felt like an oddball, um, even though I was able to find a little group of friends that we hung out more, so it was more family oriented that way. But Um, I just had fun. And if I could not sit in class because it was boring, I just wouldn't. But my hyper focus is what got me through it. I'll just sit down and learn at the last minute. So the more pressure there is, the more my brain kicks in
Right.
to work into hyper focus. So for me to plan 6 months on a project, it's not going to happen until I put some pressure on myself or there is a pressure situation, which is one of my mainstay with engineering is if there's emergencies going on, construction sites, they need a solution now. My brain's firing on all cylinders and I can really get stuff going and quickly.
Now looking back on that, when you put yourself under pressure, under load to hyper focus and just get it done, did you have the self-talk of why do I keep doing this to myself, or why do I put myself under such pressure? Back then, did you ever beat yourself up for that messaging? And now looking at the way that you see things now, do you see that as a gift? And the reason I ask this question, because it's a question that I've caught myself doing, is that I used to have that self-talk of like, why do I keep putting myself in this situation? Why do I keep leaving things to the last minute? Why do I? And because I never understood it for myself. And then once I finally did, I've actually learned to harness it and actually see it as a gift. I've actually, for myself, I've flipped it over. Did you have that same experience, Andre?
No, but sort of yes. And why I say no is because what I realized was I always kept myself, once I got my first job as an engineer, as a little small consulting firm, I always kept myself busy and everything always late so I can keep my brain going. And it was going way more than after. So like I would purposely be always setting appointments for construction sites at 7 in the morning. So I'd be up that next morning. So there's always something pressing. When I woke up in the morning, something was pressing.
Okay.
And I would work long hours just to get stuff done. And then also get this done, get that done. But I kept that going through my first job, even with with my first engineering company. And then I came to realize when I was 40, like I realized I can't keep up this pace or I'm going to physically die. Like I got this lifetime extender tool with Strategic Coach. Like I'm dying when I'm 130. So I still have a lot of time, but there's no way I can get to 130 if I keep doing it this way. But it was this constant drive. And that was keeping my brain going. Boom, 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 boom. And then when I realized that I didn't realize it was a need to keep that. And when I got diagnosed and realized that I hyper focused on my career and companies, that had to change. But yeah, that was always trying to focus myself on the hype. Yeah, it was always trying to create the situation I was able to hyper focus. And yeah, and now the way I've restructured that is I'll have hyper focus days where I'll just say this whole day I'm going to just try and work on this one project and just get going at it.
So in coach, instead of having you get four entrepreneurial days. You get buffer days, you get free days, you get focus days, and hyper focus days. You get a bonus day.
I got to hyper focus on other focus day or buffer days. What it actually does.
Okay.
But yeah, I never thought of it as the fourth day.
This is the fourth day. So bring me up to speed, Andre, on what's going on today and what you're up to now.
So right now, as I'm in the final stages of getting my podcast, the Impulsive Thinker podcast, launched for October 11th, which is also, I wanted to get this out in October, which is ADHD Awareness Month, which is I'm speaking to high achieving ADHD entrepreneurs on sharing experiences and celebrating entrepreneurial success with other ADHD entrepreneurs that have succeeded and share their trials and tribulations and success, and also bring on experts so people can learn more about their brain And then also for me is to help them rejig it so that it's, it's not a disorder if it's well managed. And then seeing that there was nothing out there for me, coach like ADHD coaches or other programs like that higher level successful ADHD entrepreneur, and also like I'm also a gifted adult. That's a different higher level of intellect and complexity with ADHD. So I didn't see a lot of out there, and I start talking to some other entrepreneurs, and they say there's a need, and I start pursuing it. That's why I started Tactical Breakthroughs. I got this ability to just switch it or see how we can improve or how you can make your own unique ADHD workable. What works for me is not necessarily going to work for you. Maybe 80% or 40% of what works for me will work for you, but I can help facilitate certain workshops or discussions that we can come to your solution, not mine. And that's I'd say is one of my gifts. So I want to be that person that wasn't there for me when I needed it. And like I've already talked to some good colleagues and friends of mine, and they're all coming out. I got 4 of them coming back, so they're going to try and check in for their own diagnosis, because they always knew something was off. But when I started talking to them and sharing my experiences, they're like, "Oh, that sounds a lot like me." Mm-hmm. And I think if I would have had that conversation at 2022, it'll be a different ball game now. And one of the reasons I went after the diagnosis, I was sitting with one of my strategic coach co-students. We're having a drink the night before a session, and I was starting to explain my frustrations and silliness. And he went up to his room and came back and gave me Dr. Ned Hollowell's Driven to Distraction book. He says, "This changed my life. Someone gifted it to me. I'm gifting this to you, and take a read." And that started my pursuit for the diagnosis, because you're just reading it, you're going, oh my Lord.
There I am.
Yeah. That's supposed to say you're supposed to have 6 of the 10 symptoms for it. It's like, I'm checking on everything in full bore. Right. So.
Yeah. So you know what, when we get later on this podcast, we're going to talk about what you're doing to better the pond. And that's where I really want to dive into the right. work that you're doing and the impact that you're having with adults. But before I move on to the next question, Andre, one of the questions I do have for you, or we'll have a discussion on, is, you've led into your fact finder and your resistant follow through. So both you and I, we met in the Colby world, and we are both well versed in it. So do you want to, just for my listeners, sort of, again, maybe explain a little bit what that means? And one of the conversations that we had prior to this recording was the looking at, the cognitive aspect of the mind, which we'll talk about. And if you see or do not see a correlationship between that and ADHD.
So you want me to start with Colby first?
Yeah, I'll start with Colby first, and just so people understand what we're talking about.
Right. So the Colby, well, we got 3 parts of the mind. Kathy Colby, the creator of the Colby Index A, has discovered a 3rd part of the mind. So we have our cognitive. Everything we know, we learned, is our cognitive. And then we have our affective part of the mind, is how we feel, what we like to do, love to do, and emotions. And then you got the cognitive part of the mind, is how you do things. So, and there's 4 modes of operation, area of modes. So one is your fact finder, is how you like to share and distribute and take in information. Either you need a lot of details or you just need bullet points. Second one is your follow through, is how you handle systems and routines. Either you're very systematic and rigid in your systems, or you're a lot more random on how you attack things. You got your quick start, is how you assess and deal with uncertainty. And I'm not talking about uncertainty of jumping out of a plane for skydiving. It's anything that's uncertain. So either you're really, you can take any uncertainty head on and see what happens, and you're okay with it. You're very good at brainstorming and impulsive thinking. or you really like to rein in the chaos and control. If you want to make things very certain before you act on certain things. Then you got your implementer, which is how you handle tangible real life stuff. So either you're a very hands-on person that you need to physically touch and tear apart things to solve a problem, and you've got a lot of quality, you need quality physical items, or you're on the other end of your conceptual. You don't need models or models to see a problem or to solve it. You're conceptual, you can solve it in your mind. So no matter what happens, every time you're dealt with a problem or a problem to solve, you're always going to attack it the same way if you're allowed to be yourself. So for me, I'm an 8255. I need a lot of details. So the first thing I do, I go in and figure out, I need all the details, and I'll research it or get the information for the problem. And then I'll go with my quick start and see if I need to create brainstorming, or if I need to maintain chaos, or I'm very into experimenting. So I'll try a bunch of different ideas, but I'll edit them too with my fact finder. And then my 5 implementer means I'm right on the fence between needing physical models and hands-on problem solving or the conceptual. And then my 2 follow through means I just randomly will go and try something in a certain way. And if it doesn't work, I can jump the order. I don't need a 10-page procedure to follow one after the other. I can jump and change my path. So what I found with this was, for me, it was cool that I learned it personally, but where I really saw it shine was when I shared it with my engineering team, and then it became a really nice communication tool. Now that we all know how to receive and take information, was very beneficial. And then for me, what I realized over the last few years, like Warren, we've been in this a long time. We've worked with Kathy Colby, each other, and we've learned a lot. And what I've seen is there is no MO for an ADHD brain. My MO, I've talked to other people's, or an MO is the 4 numbers, your mode of operandi. My daughter's MO, she's a long follow through. So she needs systems and rigid systems for her to work well. And I've come to the conclusion is that your MO, the conative, the Colby A index, is a non-ADHD strength and abilities, while the ADHD strengths is completely related to your wiring, your neurological wiring of your brain, which are 2 different things. But the other thing too I have seen is knowing the person's MO will definitely help us achieve unique solutions to the ADHD symptom management. So we'll use their MO to come up with solutions that they'll buy in.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Is, are you using that to help them, to leverage how you can work with somebody with ADHD? So you're layering the 2 together, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, because like the problem we have to solve is how to manage that person's symptoms. So we'll use their MO to come up with the solutions.
Interesting.
Right.
So
you're an 8 quick start. So we're going to start off by just coming up with random ideas. You just talk, you come out, we spit out a bunch of ideas you want until I'll write them down until you get tired of talking. Right. And then what I found out with quick starts is if they've repeated the same idea a few times, and those are the ones we're going to start with. Right.
Yeah.
And then after that, I got to bullet point it for you on the next steps, and then see what systems you already are using with your 4 follow through and how we can maintain it or slightly change it to make it work. And then with your 6 implementer, we make sure we're going to have more papers, and our plan of attack would be on paper, and maybe even some pictures just to get to see things a certain way. So definitely need them both for success, for sure.
Right. Yeah. I think it's really interesting because, when I've talked to different entrepreneurs and you see their different MOs and their Colby results, a lot of times I've seen a correlationship between ADHD mannerisms, I guess you could say, and they're Colby. So I've seen the connection between the two. But you're the first person that I've talked to that said they're totally two different things.
Yeah, but also you also attract the same type of you attract this certain type of clientele that you like to work with,
Mm-hmm.
right? So and then that's where I think a lot of people don't realize that if you're a quick start and you're really out there, you're drawing the same MOs to work with you.
Mm-hmm.
You want it to same personalities. That's your ideal client to a certain extent. So you're not seeing the other pictures. Like I'm exposed to the engineering world, long fact finder, long follow throughs.
Yeah.
And yeah, Colby has made that statement that they're not entrepreneurs, but look at a lot of these multi-million-dollar engineering firms. And those are all fact finder fall throughs. So there's another grouping of entrepreneurs are not seen. They're not in the limelight, right? Marketing people, sales people, speakers, a lot of them are long, quick starts.
Mm-hmm.
They're the ones that's front and center as the ADHD. But
Right.
then there's the other flip side is the ones that don't want the front stage, or they're the grinders. They're the ones that like to just sit in the back room and just solve, computing problems or engineering problems. They have ADHD, but they're not seen.
Right.
And that's also a clientele, like that's a grouping of people also want to reach out to, these intellectual engineering types or long fall, like the ones that are just kind of, yeah, it's great. We got more ADHD awareness, but we're also ignoring a big part of the ADHD world because we're only concentrating on the one that's out there in your face, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we know for sure it does make sense because they're the ones that are usually out front and center and get all the attention, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's where all the attention goes.
Yeah.
Interesting. So I know you kind of led into this earlier, Andre, but I want to see if you can just go back to maybe a time, and again, you said it before I did, right? Is we're all odd ducks, right?
Mm-hmm.
I believe we're all misfits, and I believe that's actually what makes you awesome, and I stand for that. So, but tell me about, if you have a specific time, like positive or negative, where you didn't really fit in, where you really like, what did you do differently to stand out? And I like the questions, what makes you awesome? And I don't mean that from an egoic standpoint, but what is it about you being the odd duck that really makes you different and unique and makes you you?
For me, I'm not afraid of an intellectual conversation and challenge. I like to learn a lot. And if I'm interested in it, like if, it's one of the things with the ADHD brain, you've got to be interested. It's got to be novel to have interest and to maintain that motivation. But I like having that stimulating, complex conversation. And I've always been the one to just challenge the status quo. I might agree with the status quo, but I want to get all the points of information. I also want everyone to get the relevant information so I'll make a good decision. So if I go to conferences or webinars or seminars, I'm usually the ones always asking the questions and I don't back down. If I didn't like the answer, I won't back down and I'll just re-ask it a different way till I get intellectually satisfied. But at the same time is with all that, I got a unique sense of humor that I use quite well. I didn't realize this till someone pointed out that I use quite well to bring out and deal with complex issues or sensitive situations. But the one thing is I'm not afraid to say, I don't know. Let's talk about it. Or, I don't know. I'll get back to you. And no BS. There's no sugarcoating anything. It's just direct answers, direct recommendations, and am not afraid to stand down and take on a big power, I guess, to a certain extent.
Well, you said that earlier, that you were always the one challenging the teacher or challenging the principal or challenging, you're always challenging. And I'm sure that there wasn't probably a lot of students that were doing what you were doing.
No,
going to make you the odd duck.
No, I remember in grade 2 where one kid got in trouble for lying, and he was ridiculed in front of the whole class. It was supposed to be a statement of, but in the end he was ridiculed. And then we caught that same teacher a week later with a lie, And she stuck to her lie. And I put up my hand. I says, why did you, the same situation, why did he get ridiculed? And for you, it's okay as an adult and a teacher. It doesn't make sense to me. Right. And it was back and forth to the point where it's like, if I recall correctly, there's no way she can get out of it. I just go to the principal's office.
Yeah. I was gonna say 100 to 1, you got taken out of the equation.
I got to talk to the principal again. So what'd you do this time? What's, I explained the whole situation. He goes, yeah, this is one of the situations there. You're probably right. But that's where I learned is I tell my kids too, is I don't care if you argue and stand up to a teacher, but just remember, they always win in the end.
Right.
And that's basically what that principal told me in grade 2. But yeah, it's one of those things. It's justice. Things got to be right. If it's unfair, it really comes to my core. And I don't care what happens to me. I will try and stand up for what's right and for others.
So do you think that's a driver for you now, Andre, to what you're doing, the work that you're doing with ADHD now, of helping, ADHD adults? Again, it's and I don't know if it's fighting for what's right is the proper term, but listening to you is like something you learned back in grade 2, as always doing what's right. And now you're trying to have a voice for other people who may not understand their own voice.
Right. And that's what I'm after, is that small percentage of ADHD adults who don't have a voice, and they're not covered by what's out there right now. The high achieving ADHD entrepreneur / gifted adult. It's an overseen crowd. There's not a lot of research in it right now, but they're starting to be diagnosed now in later stages of life. Just because the last 10 years, adults have been looked at a lot more. And there's also more on the, the entrepreneurial side. Now they're starting, that whole mantra is just because you're successful, you did well at school, you don't have it. There's no way you can have it. But there's other struggles that are not part of the diagnostic system, like emotional dysregulation, the comorbidities of depression, anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
They're starting to see it's a whole picture, and it's adults don't grow out of it. I think you'll always have ADHD, but if you got the right environment, it's not a problem.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're not in the right environment, it can become a problem.
Well,
and that's who I'm sorry. And that's the ones I'm trying to get to. It's like, where I did a lot of research. I followed a lot of groups, and I was still not a duck in those groups. And it was not speaking to me because it's, just something was different, and it's a different part of ADHD that's not seen well.
I was going to say, you know what? I think that you should thank your grade 2 teacher for telling the lie.
Yeah.
Because maybe that wasn't the case, you wouldn't be doing what you're doing today.
Could be.
She gave you a gift.
She brought my gift out to the world.
She brought your gift out to the world. Exactly. See, thank her. Right.
But let's go back on that. And this is where it's kind of interesting. At that time, the principal I had was supportive. He knew I was different, so I didn't get a lot of recourse. Like, I still had my discipline, but I wasn't put out. And in high school, there was a couple teachers, primarily the vice principal. I would skip class. I would be such a pain in the class. And, if you skip too many classes, you have to do certain remedial things. And he would never, I've had no notes. He just come to you and said, did you do, he had to ask. No, I did not. And he said, okay, fine. But they always seem to see something. There's something unique in me or special. And I didn't get the full extent of the law, quote unquote.
Yeah.
And if I didn't have, the elementary school principal, if I didn't have him, if I would have had the principal that replaced him, I think it would definitely be a different ball game. But it's, it's interesting how you brought it up that way. Not only did I challenge this grade 2 teacher, but I also had the other influences that helped.
Right. And if let's say there was a different principal, whatever, which could have actually reinforced what's wrong with you. Right. And with that, you would never, that's probably would have shifted gears into, well,
Hmm.
now it's me, now I'm the problem, right?
Yes.
Which would never have actually let you come out,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, having that support system in behind, it was obviously very advantageous, which leads me to the thought of, that's exactly what you're doing for other people. You're being that principle.
Yeah. Hmm.
It all comes
I'm
around,
the
Andre.
principal. Yeah, it comes around.
It
It's
all
true.
comes around. So, so we had, before we started got this call today, you said, question number 3, this is a hard one. And I said, don't worry about it. It will actually unfold. And so here we go. So tell me about a time when someone did something for you that left an impact in your life.
Well, I guess it was just talk about that principle. But yeah, because the other thing I'm thinking more about it is he never said what I did was wrong and not to do it again. It was always coming to figure out how to come up with solutions to reduce, how to deal with those types of situations. Um, because there's a lot of like I got myself in a lot of hot water because I did intellectual challenging. I wasn't rude or inconsiderate. It was all, you say this and then now it's different how it is. But he was starting to teach me how to deal with certain situations and I guess pick my fights to a certain degree. But what the other thing I'd also say too, the one that's had a big impact is actually my wife. She didn't. There's no drama. It was pretty. She made the relationship very easy and not judgmental, but also a lot less drama.
Mm,
Like I've seen with a lot of other people. It's like Ned Holloway says, there's, when you get ADHD, make sure you learn all about it, you find the right spouse, and then find your right job. And then with her, I definitely found the right spouse that was a lot very forgiving, understanding, but it's no drama is created with her. So I'd say those two.
hmm yeah, the no drama section is that's huge, right? I mean, because that's just a really messy dance when you get into that
Yeah.
world.
And then what she also said was some of my friends going, what are you going to do about him when he does this? She's like, I'm not getting married to change the person. She accepted who I was. And, we all have that, right? We all got our goods and our bads, and it's a package deal.
Hmm.
But the one thing she didn't do was try to change me
Yeah,
to be the person she envisioned. So that helped a lot.
yeah. Thank God for that, for sure. See, I told you it would just unfold, right? It would
I did
just.
not doubt you either, buddy.
So let's you alluded into this earlier, Andre, and this is where this fascinates me. I tell you, I am never my curiosity has no end. So what are you doing right now presently to better the pond? And more importantly, I want to know why you're doing it. And just to preempt this is, you had talked about, ADHD Awareness Month and, your coaching and those kind of things like that. So I want to know what you're doing to better the pond.
So the better the pond is I created the Impulsive Thinker podcast so I can share stories and solutions that work for me. So I'll bring in other ADHD entrepreneurs who are successful, and also other experts, not only in the ADHD world, but I'm bringing on experts that are good at strength discovery,
Mm,
team building, even some that's entrepreneurial that can help the entrepreneur improve certain parts of the business. And that's free to the world. And I just want to share the stories and then have people realize that the successful ones, we do have these struggles and challenges, and it's not just you, it's all of us. We all, you're not alone, you're not broken.
mm,
And let's get you out of this mask and get rid of the character you've been playing for a while. And that's what I wanted to do with the tactical breakthroughs, is create workshops and develop tools where people can learn more about themselves, the true selves, and then be able to advocate for themselves, but just to understand how you work and why, and then work well at what you do well, and then just forget about everything else and hire. It is empowering. And like I said, I got a unique ability to just research it, come up with something. I'm really good at simplifying complex stuff. And that's where majority of people want. They just want, bullet points. Let's figure this out and let's go. Because like it was a constant struggle with my executive dysfunction, emotional dysregulation. And then, you realize after you've been doing this since, entrepreneurship since 2007, and all you've been doing is stuff you don't like to do.
Mhm.
And that's the cause of a lot of the frustration. Well, let's get rid of it. It can't come down to simple solutions. So that's how I want to better the pond, is to get people out there that have been neglected not intentionally, unintentionally neglected in the ADHD world, and work on ourselves. Because us at this level, like you, Warren, it's a lot about self-awareness and actualization and improving the self. And that's who I want to work with.
Mhm.
It's not just your basic ADD struggles. We've all overcome it to a certain degree. Let's refine it and let's get you working at your pure best and enjoy life now, right? It's like someone told me, you've been successful, you've achieved a lot of stuff, but the only problem is you missed a class on how to be happy. Right? I've never celebrated. I need my psychiatrist to point out that I've been very successful. At that point, I says I'm a failure. I don't know. And it took that conversation to realize it. No matter how many times I wrote it, I need someone to slap me in the face and say, look at this. You are successful. It's like, oh, you know what? I am. But I needed someone to point that out to me, because it's on to the next. I'm done. I'm on to the next.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I definitely appreciate that, because, I was going to say to you earlier when you were talking about school, as I could, well, I'd probably lost count how many times that I was back in either recess or lunch or after school writing lines on the chalkboard back in the days when they used to use chalk and chalkboards. Aging myself here. But it was always the fact of, this is what I did wrong. So I did wrong. So that was always reinforced for me. And I didn't have that principle that was actually understanding. It was fear, is actually, that's how it was approached when I was a kid, right? Don't do it again, or else.
Right.
Right. And as I grew older and learned about my own self-awareness, whatnot, of just, I'm the happiest when I can just freewheel it, and I can just go from thing to thing to thing to thing to thing, and I'll just figure it out as I go along. Right. And that's actually where, and I've learned for myself to actually find joy in it, versus beating myself up for it because I'm not doing it the way that other people do it.
Yeah. That is freeing.
Mm-hmm.
Once you realize that this is how you work, and it's always been, you knew it, know that this is the best way to work. It's huge. It's validating. It's freeing. And then now the next trick is to stay within that wheelhouse, and how to advocate or hire. Like for the entrepreneur, you're in control. It's your game. It's your rules. If you don't want to do that anymore, then you hire, or you hire service to do it. Why do it?
Right.
But now that you said you put on the board, I was in French immersion, so it was verb conjugations.
Oh my.
Right? Oh yeah. And then if the more you did, like I was doing 30, 40, 50 a night, and I had to get my parents to sign it too. So yeah, I remember that.
Oh, you poor kid. So looking back and looking forward, and the lessons that you've learned along the way, can you paint me a picture of your golden pond, Andre? Like what does the future look like for you?
Everyone in that pond, floating or standing or sitting on the edge or flying, are all accepted, and everyone understands everyone's uniqueness and accepts it. We're all unique. We all have a unique value to the world, and you're accepted, and join us.
I love it. I absolutely love it. That is right. And the reason I love it is right in line with the work I'm trying to accomplish as well. So
yeah, and I know you're doing very well at that too.
Thank you. All right. So here's my last and final question of the podcast, and we'll get into some details. But so Andre, if you were standing at the top of a mountain and the whole world was intently listening to you, what would you say?
Interesting. accept who you are and how you work, and don't be ashamed of it. Be you, be your game, and enjoy life.
That's simple.
Simple enough.
Excellent. Love it. So before we get into some of the details for you, Andre, because I really want to, I want people to know you about the podcast and your website. We've led into it, but I want to, harness that information. But is there any particular reading that you would suggest for people listening in regards to adult ADHD, or books that had worked for you?
Ned Hollowell's Driven to Distraction is a good one. It's very, well, for me, it was great because there's a lot of facts. But you also have Rick Green's Lost Keys in ADHD. He's a Canadian. He's one of the co-creators of the Red Green Show. That's a very simplified discussion. He has his humor part, but also has a psychiatrist talk about the science. CADAC.ca, the Center of ADHD Awareness Canada, has a lot of resources and have really increased their resources for adult ADHD also. I'd say those are the main ones to start. And then from there there's umpteenth, many different types of books kind of discussing it. I forget who wrote it, but there's another one that my psychiatrist gave me, was You're Not Dumb, Stupid, or Lazy. It was the title of it. And that one, I went to psychiatrist to prove that it was not ADHD. And then when he told me this book to read as my homework to the next appointment, I really read it to disprove it. And I was like, there's no way I can disprove it.
you had no argument at that point.
No, there's nothing I can do about that. But yeah, it's a lot of that. So those are good readings. But Attitude magazine, ADD Tude, is a good resource with a lot of blogs and short written stuff of good stuff. Excellent. But educate yourself as much as you can.
And the one that I had actually had mentioned to you before the podcast was Scattered Minds by Gabor Mate was another one that's actually an excellent book as well. And I really like his writing as well.
Oh yeah, Ned Hollowell and Dr. Raddick just came out with ADHD 2.0. Actually, it's smaller and references a lot of stuff from Driven to Distraction too. So I'd start with there first. And if you want more details about it, then you can go with the other one. But that one just came out in the spring, and that was a really good read. And he actually covers the Colby. Kathy Colby's work in it too.
Oh, does he? Yeah, I know they're doing some work together. I'm actually going to look that up. That's as soon as you said shorter, it has my attention. So Andre, I really want to sincerely thank you for today. Thank you for sharing your stories. Thank you for all the work that you're doing. I think it is hugely valuable to a lot of people. And as you said, you didn't figure this out till you were 40, and I'm really hoping that you can get people that are younger than that to actually start to understand their gifts and talents and not seeing it as a dysfunction but as a strength. So so where do we go to find you? I know you talked about the Impulsive Thinker podcast, which gets released on
October 11th, 8 o'clock Eastern.
October 11th. We want to showcase that. We got Tactical Breakthroughs, which is your website.
Yep. So tacticalbts.com.
Tacticalbts.com.
Yep.
Okay.
So that's the coaching side and developing the workshops. I got some workshops in development. And then for the podcast is theimpulsivethinker.com. Has a little bit of information there and links to subscribe to the podcast as a trailer also. Excellent.
And then where do we find you on social?
On LinkedIn, Facebook. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I have Twitter stuff, but I don't really deal with too much with that, but it's all there.
Okay, me too. And if you ever need any engineering on the side.
Oh, that's Objective Engineering. Yeah, objectiveeng.ca. Yeah. it's not part of a code or typical stuff, that's where we shine. We deal with the unique stuff. So very
Geez,
niche.
hard to believe.
Yeah. Our quota is we're engineering simplicity objectively.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Love it. That's your side hustle.
Yeah. And then, it's a side hustle now. And then the other thing too is we solve problems, we do not design them.
Ah, there we go. That's a keeper. We do not solve problems. We do not design problems. We solve them.
Yeah.
Yeah. There you go. Perfect.
That's other engineers' jobs.
Yes. Hand that off. All right. So there you have it, folks. We had a great time here today with Andre. This was fantastic. I could actually talk to you all day.
Anytime, buddy.
So this is Warren Berry flocking off to take you beyond the pond to better the pond, because we're better together. Thank you so much, Andre.
Thanks, Warren, for this opportunity to raise more awareness. Take care.
I sure hope so. We're going to definitely be sharing this with the world.
Thank you.